Ah. Well, space person would have worked. Space person would have worked. Ah. Yeah. Yeah. I want to go. Well, space person would have worked. Space person would have worked. Ah. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I can hear your YouTube. Yeah, and I don't know if everybody knows, but if you go to the NASA website and you go to their imagery, they have an imagery database there somewhere, and all of that imagery is public domain. So you can use it for stuff like that, for like your screensaver and your back. You're just not supposed to sell it. But the images are available, yeah. So So is it Dan from JPL? Yeah, he's awesome. And if you haven't had it, I'm sure then you've looked at the studio at Jet Propulsion Lab. It's incredible, the creative stuff that they do. And really they're telling the science story very artistically, that I really believe is what it's one of the best ways for us to communicate with everyone about complex things. Yeah. I did two missions to space. My first one was a long duration flight, so I flew up on a space shuttle. They dropped me off. I spent a little over 3 months on the International Space Station, and then I came home on another space shuttle. And then about a year and a half later, I flew back to the station, but only for 2 weeks on the last flight of the Space Shuttle Discovery. And I can tell you, they had to pull. I just do this because they had to pull my clawing hands off of the hatch to get me back in the shuttle to come home. That flight was 91 days. So a little over 3 months. It was odd. And, it went by really fast. I have to say, it went by super fast. As I was getting ready to come home, I was thinking, man, I'm really excited about getting home to see my family. It was right after Thanksgiving and all of that. But on the other hand, I was thinking, oh, man, it wouldn't be great if they were up here because I could spend 3 more months here. It was cool. Yeah. Yeah, it's a really special experience, I think. And all of us are going through this deal right now where we're, in our homes, we're doing our job as crew members here on Spaceship Earth by isolating and social distancing, all those new words. And I mean, that's that experience in space. But just like I think in our own homes and what surrounds us, we can discover so many new things and learn about ourselves and experience that kind of thing in a positive way too. And yeah, no better view than out the window of a space station. Yeah. that wasn't my story, but Steve, I think there's a slide you can put up that has a picture of an airplane on it. Okay. All right. And I'll start talking, but I'll tell you, I wasn't 3, but I was almost 7 when I watched the moon landing, and with my family. And I think even at 7, you realize that's a really extraordinary thing, right? That, this going to the moon and people on the moon. Um, and while I didn't at that point think, "Oh, I need to be an astronaut. I want to be an astronaut." I think it was inspirational for sure. My dad, this airplane that you're seeing in this picture, is one of my dad's airplanes. And as a kid, we grew up hanging out at the airport because my dad liked to build and fly small airplanes. And I think that's where it really got in my blood, was this desire to fly and to know how things fly. And then when I wanted to go to school, I was like, "Oh, what do I do if I want to know how things fly?" Well, you study aeronautical engineering. And while I was there, it was like, "Oh, if you want to know how airplanes fly, why would you not want to know how rocket ships fly?" Right? And that was kind of the path. And I wanted to work for NASA. I grew up in Florida, right across the state from Cape Canaveral and Kennedy Space Center, and was very fortunate to get a job with NASA as an engineer on the shuttle program, on the space shuttle program. And it was probably about 10 years into that job that I started thinking that, oh man, maybe astronaut isn't just one of those jobs that other special people get to do. Because I never thought they would pick me. I never thought, yeah. Yeah, you have to apply. And I was very thankful. I spoke to a couple people that I worked with that I considered to be mentors, and they encouraged me. Really, they didn't say, "Oh, Nicole, you'll make the best astronaut there ever was." They just said, "Pick up the pen and fill out the application." Yeah, you certainly do. You certainly do. And so to all the kids out there, I'm like, there are things we have control of. We can do things like fill out the application that puts ourselves in the running, and to not doubt so far that we don't do that. Um, and I was lucky to work at NASA and see that, this is going to be a little bit strange, but almost, I would say 99.9% of an astronaut's job is not flying in space. It's doing all kinds of other things. It's getting ready to fly, it's training, it's helping other people on their missions, and that kind of thing. So I just discovered that was a lot like what I was doing as an engineer already for NASA. And then the flying in space part is kind of this bonus, that's really special bonus. I did do training on the Vomit Comet. It is very appropriately named, because it's a lot like going over a roller coaster over and over the top, and where you feel like you're coming out of your seat and stuff. I did that, and it's good training, but it's not what it's like to fly in space, because you got to imagine you never come down the other side. You just go up, and now you're just floating the whole time in space. So it's a little bit different. Yeah, nothing prepares you. I watched a lot of space shuttle launches while I worked at Kennedy Space Center and stuff, but nothing prepares you for it. You get out there a couple hours ahead of launch, and then you get strapped in, um, and so I napped for a little while. You get all comfy. You're laying on your back. You've got a really great picture of a space shuttle at the launch pad, and so you can tell it would be like an airplane tipped up on its tail, right? So you'd be laying on your back, you're all snugged in, and the crew doesn't really get into the countdown until about 20 minutes before launch. So I napped a little bit, and so did my crewmates. And then once it started going, it wasn't until probably that what we all know of launch, that 10-9-8 kind of thing. You hear it, and you do. You've got your big helmet on, and you hear it in your headset, and It's not until then that you really think you're even going to go, because it's so unreal to think, oh, I'm going to go to space today. That just doesn't seem like it should be real. And on the space shuttle, you can see there's red covers on them right now, but those three engines, you got it right behind you. Right behind you is really good. Yeah, really good. Yeah. Yeah, and so the one behind you, the engines on the space shuttle, and there's that big orange tank above it. All that has is liquid fuel in it to feed those three little engines on the back. And so at 6 seconds, when it was like 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, that's when all that fuel started flowing from that tank down to those little engines. And the whole space shuttle would tip forward about 10 feet and then come back to vertical. And at 0, that's when those big white solid rocket boosters on the side, they would light. And that's when you all of a sudden knew, oop, that's what 7 million pounds of exploding rocket thrust feels underneath you. And it's just like you are kicked off the launch pad. I mean, literally, it feels like somebody slammed you from behind, sitting on top of you. You're shaking like, you never could imagine shaking. And no, no, it's so much different than what you try. I mean, the simulators just don't do it, but it's going to happen. I mean, that's the one thing that other people tell you is you are going to really shake. It's going to feel like you're jello inside. And then those solid rocket boosters separate at about 2.5 minutes. And then the shaking stops, but you feel like you've got three of you sitting on top of you because you're accelerating so fast. You're going, literally, we go off the launch pad from standing still to flying, around the Earth in 8.5 minutes. So from 0 to 17,500 miles an hour in 8.5 minutes. And so that's super fast. And it's just, then you get to space in 8.5 minutes and you're like, your arms are floating, everything's floating. It's just, and you wonder, how did I go from just sitting on that launch pad to now I'm circling the Earth at 5 miles a second? I think it's a combination of all of it because you're kind of expecting all of it. And so you have this very abrupt, I just had felt like three people are sitting on top of me to now I'm floating, like I could float. And you're watching your pencil float up in front of you, and anything like stuff that was on the floor that didn't get tied down is floating up, and it's all this experience all at one time. So, yeah. Yeah. Well, on the space station, primarily, it's a big laboratory. It's a big science laboratory, really. So every day we're doing some mix of science experiments about all kinds of stuff. And there's one slide you could show. I think I'm holding, like, it looks like I got a ball of water in front of my face. Yeah, yeah. Yep, that's it. And so you've got, like, they're down in that screen. So we do all kinds of science experiments. And the reason we do science on the space station is because we can take gravity out of the equation. And it's really cool that we can do that. So we can look at all kinds of stuff we thought we knew and learn different things about it. But that picture in the bottom, I don't know what that would be, bottom left is that's how water behaves. You put water out in space or in microgravity, and it's like a sphere. It doesn't fall down. It doesn't, kind of shower you. It's these balls. And so we can do that with all kinds of different materials. And then the picture on the right, we are the experiment in space. Every day we're looking at ourselves and how our bodies respond to that environment. And then I would say there's a picture probably close by that where it looks like like a spacewalk. That one, yeah, that one. Yeah. So one of the tasks I got to do was a spacewalk, and I was outside for, I don't know, almost 7 hours. And I show the picture on the bottom left because that's the one where my mom reminds me that she was afraid while I was in space. And she's like, no, I could have, but you can see I've got like this little line, this tether that is attached to the station. We actually have two of them on it pretty much all the time. Yeah. And so, that one that you see, kind of the rope that you see there, that's what I would call my local tether. So that is only about 4 feet long. And then there's one that's attached to me that goes all the way back, probably about 80 feet to some other place on the space station. And worst case, that would bring me back. But my mom always says that they should have a two hands on the space station rule. And so, yeah, it is. Well, I think well, so two things. One is that it's been pretty rare when we've had two women at the same time on a flight or on the station. And that's changing. So you see, I mean, recently we've had quite a few crews where there have been two women flying. When I did my spacewalk, I was the 10th women, 10th woman to do one. There was plenty of opportunity for it to happen before. It just happened now. And I'm really thankful. I think historically it's an interesting thing. But I think what it points out, and it's what I like to tell kids all the time, is that the spaceship doesn't care if you're a boy or girl. Doesn't care. As long as you've trained and know how to use that equipment and you can do the tasks, which we have shown we can do equally as well or better, it doesn't matter. And I was very happy to see those two go out and do it and rock it. They they really did a great job, and they went out and did more. The problem with the suits is that we only supply so many of a different size up there. And all of us, like just with your clothes down here, or like gloves, when you're working with gloves, you want to have the right size gloves on so that you can actually do the job. And they had only configured for that walk that they were planning on, they had only configured two of a different size suit. So when they went to put both Anne and Christina out, it wasn't going to work because Anne wasn't going to be able to wear the bigger suit like they thought she might be able to. And that was a very wise move for Anne to say, I shouldn't wear that bigger suit, because she had already done a spacewalk in the smaller one. And it was a very wise move for NASA not to send them out in those suits. The sad thing is, yeah, yeah, I mean, the sad thing is that there aren't more of the smaller suits up there configured, at any given time. But now I think they've figured that out. Yep. Yep. Yeah, I think there's a couple. There's ones where, like that, where you can send up the experiment. There are ones where we have these robots on the station. They look like big bowling balls. They're called spheres, and they're programmed to fly in different ways around the inside of the space station. And kids through their schools can get involved with being the ones on the ground interacting with those robots while the astronauts are working with them. So they can program them to do particular things. And I think that the program is called Spheres, like all capitals. It's an acronym for something, but there's that. Yep, there's that one, and then there's another one that I think they're still doing called Earth Cam, where yeah, where they can figure out when the station is flying over a particular spot, the kids can actually take pictures remotely from Earth of what the station is flying over at that time, and they can have particular reasons why they would want to take those pictures and things that they need to study. And of course, I think the work like you mentioned with exolabs, there's several different kinds of those. NanoRacks does a thing where you can send up little experiments in these little pods, and then the astronauts interact with them for you, and then the stuff comes back to you, or you see the results on the space station. That's kind of cool too, because you get to learn how scientists are developing their experiments too to go into space. And yeah, I think it's great, and then I'll just put a shameless plug out there. I've got this art suit behind me. And we've had the opportunity through this group called the Space for Art Foundation to work with kids around the world and have them contribute their artwork. And then our spacesuit company, ILC Dover, who makes our real spacesuits, has volunteered to sew that artwork together into these spacesuit covers. And a couple of them have actually made it to the space station. But our goal really is, it's kind of space themed art therapy. Get the kids thinking about, you guys need to know that you are Earthlings, you are crew on Spaceship Earth, and that you're working with your crew members all over the planet. And if we can do that creatively by putting all of your artwork together into a spacesuit or some other kind of electronic version that's like a global art project, that's kind of cool too. And I invite you to check out our website. Steve, it's the Space for Art Foundation, and then it's our projects page. And there's a new project called Beyond, where we're inviting kids from all over the world to send us a picture of your artwork where you're thinking about Earth as a planet, as part of the universe. And then we'll figure out how to put it all together into something cool. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Good luck.
I am.
Okay. Okay.
I wanted to know how a candle looked in space.
Oh, wow. Great question, William. So, so that picture that Mr. Steve showed where there was me with the water down in the corner, and then above me, I'm working on this big, look like just a piece of equipment, like a canister. And that actually is the insides of the combustion chamber that we have on the space station. And so pretty much every day on the space station, inside that chamber, we're burning different kinds of fuel mixtures. So that one above the picture, yeah, I'm kind of in white gloves and hanging on to this thing with a big ring on it, and I'm probably changing out a fuel cartridge in that, and then I'm going to put that whole big thing back into this chamber on the station. And inside, the fuels are burning. And to answer your question, fuels, candles, flames, they burn and they look a little bit like that ball of water does. So they burn like a sphere instead of like a teardrop kind of shape that we see down here on Earth. And it's really, really cool because the scientists can then look at that ball of flame and they can see how all of the different components are interacting. They can figure out how to make fuels that, burn better, like to make us go faster, or burn in a way which I would say is better to pollute less too, which is really, really neat because we can use all of that kind of thing down here on Earth too. Thanks, William. Great question.
How do you sleep in space?
Oh, the best sleep I've ever had in my entire best sleep I've ever had in my entire life. So imagine where you are right now. First of all, that you're floating and that you could float and sleep on any wall, the ceiling, the floor, because nothing feels, there you go, there I am sleeping on the ceiling of the space station or on the space shuttle, right? So we would always use sleeping bags because if you're floating around, your hair could get caught in things, or you might, bump your noggin on something, and that would hurt. But on the shuttle, we would sleep anywhere we wanted, like up on the ceiling, on the floor. I always chose the ceiling because where else can you sleep on your ceiling except for in space? And then on the space station, we each have our own individual crew compartments, about the size of an old phone booth, if you know what that is. And it's perfectly spaced. And you get in your sleeping bag, shut the door. It's really dark and cool and comfortable. And oh my gosh, I would be to sleep in about 5 minutes and I wouldn't wake up until the alarm went off. It was amazing sleep. Well, on the space shuttle, where the windows were kind of surrounding us, we would put up like little shutters, little shades on the windows so it would stay dark inside. But you're right, Steve. Like we go around and we get a sunrise or sunset every 45 minutes. If you go to the slide, it's one of the very first slides. It shows like a little silhouette of the shuttle against one of those sunrises or sunsets, and it's amazing. On the space station, our windows aren't in our view when we're sleeping because we can shut the little door on our crew compartment and make it very, very dark and cool. It's actually quieter inside of the crew compartments too. Normally, when you're out inside the station or the shuttle, there is quite a bit of noise because there's a lot of fans running and computers and equipment and stuff, so it gets kind of loud. Um, this is not the one, but I love this picture. So, my friend Steve Bowen, who was out doing a spacewalk, I was getting to boss him and my other friend Al around while they were doing their spacewalk outside, and so they took a picture of me looking out the window at them. Yeah, that's one of my favorite pictures. Yeah, my very favorite pictures. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Um, my question is, um, are there any regrets that you have about becoming an astronaut?
Wow. No, I don't think so. I think I feel really, really fortunate to have had the opportunity to do the work that I did while I was an astronaut. I mean, I really believe that what we're doing in space is is so important to us down here on Earth. I mean, everything we're doing in space is really ultimately about improving life on Earth. And so it felt really good to be part of, something like that. I also think, in having that job, I got to work with people all over the world. I mean, the International Space Station, which this year has been 20 years since we've had astronauts from 15 different countries living and working together on the space station peacefully, successfully, know. And I think it's such a great example for how we should be living as crew members here on Spaceship Earth. And such a positive experience for me and for my family. My son was 7 years old when I went to space the first time. And so his whole life growing up was really me, me training to go to space. And you can see there's a picture on the camera or on the view now where that's him at a couple times before my first flight at spacewalk training, and before my second flight, he got to fly the simulator for how we landed the space shuttle. And I tried to make sure that he felt like he was part of our crew. And so I think it was a really good experience for him too, to be able to meet all the people I was working with and get to know that, it wasn't just us living here in Florida that life is all about. It's about all of the people that we share the planet with. And he has friends, and I would say people that he would consider family, that live in all of those countries now. And I know I could send him off for, 2 weeks to Star City, Russia, and he'd have family members to hang out with, and to Europe and Canada, and let's get some crew members, from South Africa. We got Mark, but yeah, I did while he was training. But yeah, more and more people are from around the world are going to be traveling to space. And I think what it does is it brings us together. So I don't know. I can't think. And regret is a really strong word. Yeah. Oh, there might be a picture there. That was an amazing experience. So what Mr. Steve is talking about is I got to go live underwater for 18 days as part of a crew where we trained and we lived. You can see it, the picture up in the top left. That was this habitat called Aquarius. It's about the size of a school bus. It sits on the floor of the ocean off the coast of Florida at about 60 feet underwater. And our crew, we lived and worked there for 18 days, like we would if we were on a spaceship. And it was the closest thing, the best preparation overall to what it was going to be like to live and work in space. And I love it because it allowed us to explore the ocean too. We kind of joke that, when you go to space, you're going to outer space. When you go and live underwater, you're going to inner space. And it's like the earth is surrounding you. And it was an amazing way to not just prepare, to go do a job as an astronaut, but it was also a really incredible way to get another perspective on the planet that we live on. Yeah, great training.
If you could take, because I heard that you could take like a few special items with you onto the spaceship. Which items did you take?
Well, I took a couple things. The first thing that was most important to me was to take something from my son. And so I did. I took like this little, he had a tiny, so he was 7 at the time. He had a tiny little, like black and white stuffed dog. So I took that with me, and I took pictures of my family and friends, and like some t-shirts from my high school and university. And because I think what you want to do when you take that stuff with you is you want to be able to share the experience with the people that are following along, that are you want them to experience it too. But one of the other things I took that I wouldn't have thought to take on my own was the little watercolor kit that I used to paint in space. And that was because somebody that was helping me get all that stuff that I could take ready, which really, I say all that stuff, it was a bag about this big, of personal things I could bring. She reminded me that I wasn't going to just be working there. I was going to be living there, and that I should take something with me. I was going to be there for months. I should take something with me that I would enjoy doing in my free time. So I took up this little watercolor kit and painted while I was in space. And I'm so thankful to her for that, because I think that it really I like to think of it like it put the human in human spaceflight. We're not just there working. We're living in space now, and we need to treat it like a human activity. Yeah. Yeah.
We go to the toilet.
I wanted to know how the toilet works in space.
Did Mr. Steve prompt you for that question? No. It always comes up. It's a great question, actually. First of all, I'll say it's a great question because when we go and we fly in space, right? And you're going to be floating while you live in space. Almost all of it is going to be different to what you experience down here on Earth, right? I like to think of it like it's part of the adventure of living in space, that the way you wash your hair isn't going to be the same, the way you eat, all of these things, pretty much about the way you live, are different. And going to the bathroom is definitely one of those. This is a picture of the space station potty, that I like to call it. And you can see on the back, it's a little bit difficult to see, but there's this little round picture, and it's actually a picture like of an outhouse. And so we kind of joke about the orbital outhouse team, our folks on the ground that help us with our potty equipment. And so you also can see in the picture, there's a little yellow funnel kind of hiding in the back corner. And from that, there's a big, long green hose that goes down from it, down into a tank on the station. Yeah, there you go. There you go. So that big, long hose goes into a tank. And the yellow funnel is where everyone, I'll just use number one, everyone, you're pretty much floating. It's all about aim and speed. Into that little funnel, and there's a fan and a system that turns on a vacuum that allows the fluid to go into that hose, and then it goes into a system where we recycle it into clean drinking water. And I'll just stop at that right now, and I'll go on to number two. So number two is that little silver can that you see down on the bottom with, it looks like a kind of a square lid on top of it, square white lid. So a lot like camping. I'll just tell you, a lot like camping. Again, it's all about aim and speed. You need to get properly aligned over the hole in that can, and all the solid waste is collected in there until that can is full. And then we all take turns having the job to put the lid on it and seal it up tight. And then it goes, we do not recycle the solid waste. That solid waste goes in to a cargo vehicle that we're sending back with a bunch of trash in it, and burns up in the atmosphere. And so, as my colleague Chris Hadfield likes to say, you might actually, one of those shooting stars that you're wishing, making a wish on, might actually be solid waste coming back from the International Space Station, burning up in space. Yeah. Yeah, right now we have two toilets on the space station. They both work pretty much the same way. We try to distribute crew members across them so that we're not overly burdening one or the other. And they work quite well. And it's an interesting thing, because as astronauts, we do everything up there. It's not like we call for a plumber if there's a problem with the toilet. We fix the toilet. Same with the electrical system, or something out on the outside of the station that needs to be done, or the science, or all of that. It's kind of jack of all trades. The medical stuff, we do it, and it's really a cool thing because you get to experience so many different roles, so many different things while you're working as one job as an astronaut. Ah, I see her.
What was your favorite thing you saw while you were on the space station?
So there's two things really. One, my first favorite thing was on a video conference. My very, well, I would say every time actually when I would get to speak to my son and my husband, because once a week we would do a video conference and I would get to see them. That's a favorite thing to see from space. That's a favorite thing to see from no matter where you are. And then my second thing was the Earth, the planet, to be able to float in front of the window and see Earth just glowing and colorful. And I mean, imagine the brightest light bulb you can imagine, that you've splattered it with all these colors that you know Earth to be, and you just turn it on and you almost can't look at it because it's so bright. And it's against the blackest black you've ever seen. And it's just gorgeous. And so it was a surprise every time I looked out the window. And oh, what's that? That's a picture of Earth. Yeah. Yeah. Imagine that, like, just super glowy. I don't know how else to describe it. That's a really good picture. But it's like everything where when you see it with your own eyes, I think it's because you're not just seeing it, you're feeling it too. It's kind of getting in you. And this picture, I really like it because I think Africa might actually be in that view, but also if you look at the Earth and where the little cursor is right now, you can see this thin, thin, thin blue line that goes around the Earth, and that is the line of our atmosphere.
Yeah.
It is super thin, and so always interesting to think about how the fact when we stand here on Earth and we look up, um, that sky doesn't really go on forever. It's super thin.
Thank you.
It's been good. Don't talk about it. Don't talk about it.
Yes, hi, I'm a teacher. My students ask these things. They want to know where do you eat in space? And another student wants to know, do you like to, where do you sleep in space? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. So sleeping, we float. We sleep in a sleeping bag. We float inside our sleeping bag, and you just stick yourself to the wall or the ceiling. And on the space station, we each have an individual crew module or crew compartment that's about the size of a phone booth. So I would just stick my sleeping bag up on the wall in there, and it was the best sleep ever. Best sleep ever. Eating, that's another really great question. I think, there's so much about just the way the human has to live in space, and eating is a big deal. It's a lot like camping food, I guess. We have to add water to things to eat. There you go. There's some, that looks like either the spinach or the asparagus, like kind of mushed up inside there, but you would add water to it and it's really, really good. Um, but we eat in actually that place where Chris is right now. We eat there, and then we also eat together down in one of the Russian segments too. They have kind of a table that comes out. Although, as you can imagine, you're not really sitting around a table; you're kind of floating around a table, and eating. And you cut little holes in those packages, and you eat with a spoon. And the food actually quite tasty. And we get food from all of our different partner countries. So it's a nice mix as well. Yeah. Well, I think, it's funny because I don't think it takes the spicy food to perhaps cause some of the bathroom issues. A lot of people, when they first get to space, their body is trying to adapt to that environment. And some people more than others get affected by that. And that could be the belly having issues, that could be a headache, it could be nausea. So we try to prepare for that. The spicy food thing is interesting because a lot of people who like spicy food on the ground, they want it to be even spicier in space because you get kind of this congested feeling when you're in space. So there is a lot of like Tabasco and sriracha sauce and things up there that people add to their food. But I think that's usually the people that already liked spicy food. But the bathroom can accommodate, and we all go into it with the idea that we're each going to clean up after ourselves if there's a problem, and and let each other know. Yeah, it's funny because I think, as astronauts, most of our training and whatever it is that we're doing, embedded in it somehow is how do you work as a team, right? So, and your crew members for quite a while before you fly. And even if somebody had to change at the last minute to come on your crew, you're all kind of training the same way. So you understand how the expectation of how you'll work there, right? Um, but I think in this time right now, I'm thinking a lot about that experience and what did I do there that, since I couldn't go out into a park, you can't just leave the space station and go to the park or, come home at the end of the day. You're in this relatively confined space. What were the kinds of things I did there that I am thinking about now? One of them is I looked out the window a lot from the space station, right? That was my way of connecting with nature, was to look at Earth and look at the stars and, appreciate them from that new perspective. I'm doing that here. I'm trying as much as I can, to get outside because I can do that here. I'm looking, around my backyard kind of in a new way and, appreciating what's in the garden and the butterflies. And I know it sounds a little hokey, but that's something that's very healthy for us, I think. Um, I'm trying to work more on the art projects with the kids. That's why we started this Beyond project, because we want people to feel like they can come together that way. Things like this activity, Steve, I think are really important too, is that you get kids who are not, you guys aren't getting to go to your classrooms the way you normally would have before and go to the park or go play with each other. But these kinds of things are really good because you can interact and learn new things, but also see that other people are interested in them as well. And it can, I hope, can be fun too. Um, yeah. And then like even in space, there's times where you just kind of have to go your separate way and find a place to have, you know, be at peace by yourself versus having, your family, your brothers, sisters, mom, dad, whatever, like right there with you. You can go off by yourself and read or paint or do something that kind of lets you be alone too when you're in a space like this. And we would do that in space too. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, was it hard living in space?
Was it hard? It really wasn't. Before you go to space the first time, you kind of get this impression that everything's going to be more difficult, because you're floating. And, down here, like you do work, like even the simplest thing, you have leverage. You can stand on the floor, you can hold on, you can hit something. And up there, you don't. So we go through all this training the first time, and you really think it's going to be so much hard. It's really not. it's just different, you know, and your brain and your body get used to working in that different environment. And there are things that are a little more challenging than they are down here, but you just figure out how to deal with them. So, for instance, if I was in space right now, my coffee cup would be floating, this napkin would be floating, everything I have around me would be floating up around me if I didn't secure it somehow. So the most difficult thing in space is to keep track of your stuff. Honestly, to keep track of your stuff, because if you let it just float, it's going to float somewhere else, and you know, you probably won't find it for a while. My commander Frank lost his glasses a couple times, and it would be funny. Like a month later, we'd find them like floating down a module somewhere, and give them to him. But yeah, things float. Why Mars? I'm thumbs up for Mars. I see that your T-shirt, you know, has us occupying Mars, and I like the idea of occupying and settling. I'm not a huge fan of colonizing. I don't think that's the right attitude to go there with. But you know, for me, I think Mars is a challenge, right? Just getting to space was a challenge at one point, right? It still is. It's really challenging to get out of this gravity well here on Earth and just to be able to orbit the planet. Or, you know, we're talking about going back to the moon, which I am like two thumbs up for that. It's like, I think that's a pathway onto Mars, but it's also like the moon is this, you know, this space station that God put there in place for us, right? It's 2 days away. 2 days away. There's resources there. There's ways we can live and work on the moon that really benefit life here on Earth, as well as helping us get to Mars in a more direct fashion. And Mars is a challenge, and I think as human beings we like to overcome some challenges. Ultimately, we're going to need to get out of this solar system, you know, billions of years from now. We need to be doing that interstellar thing and expanding humanity to other places in the universe. Yeah. Well, I always try to go into it with the idea that it's Hollywood. I love it when I see space movies, though, because I think it gets people interested in space in a new way. You know, there's this idea, if we think back like on sci-fi, my husband has this really great saying that, you know, the sci-fi that becomes sci-fact. You know, when we can imagine really, really like far out things, then we start thinking about doing them too. And that's really cool because we should be challenging our brains with those kinds of problems. But I think teachers probably watch movies about teaching and they're like, we would never do that way. Or firemen watch it about, you know, putting out fires. And I do. My two favorite space movies are Galaxy Quest and Rocket Man. Yeah. Yeah. And they are I'll tell you the reason why I like them is because, and yeah, you might want to wait a little bit, but because they're a little bit, they're putting humor into it. And when you start doing that, you start looking at the ways human beings really live and work with each other. You know, it's not this serious thing all the time. You want to be on a crew of people that you know you can have a good time with, that you can enjoy the experience, but that you also know when something goes wrong that you'll all have each other's back and you'll work like a team to solve it. And I think that's anywhere. That's not just in space, that's anywhere.
What are the benefits of sending humans to Mars rather than sending a robot with many measuring sensors?
Ah, wow, that's a good question. So, We've been sending robots and spacecraft to Mars for quite a while. I'm sure since you asked that question, you know the ones that are on Mars right now, right? The rovers and the other orbiters and things. And we learn some really amazing things about these other places. And Mars isn't the only place we've done that. We've, recently had that, New Horizons out at Pluto, and Cassini at Saturn, and Juno at Jupiter. And we come back with all these wonderful lessons about those places. And I always like to think about it like they're kind of our pathfinders, right? We even named a rover after after that. They're out there. They're figuring out these ways that we can learn more about the place. And then, we go there, and we either go there for I would say there's a number of reasons. There's an exploration reason, to understand more about who and where we are in this universe together. There's ultimately, how do we improve by going to this place? How will we improve life on Earth? I think that's a big deal. And the science of what we can discover about that place that helps us learn more about our place. I think the best pictures we get back from those robotic missions are the ones where Earth is the little dot of light. We're looking for ourselves in that picture. Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question or not, but I think ultimately it's about the robots and the people working together. And that's what we're doing on the space station right now. We have robots there. We use them inside and outside the station. And sometimes they're doing things by themselves, operated, programmed, and other times we're working side by side to do things. Yeah, I think so. I think the best way to do that would be to be able to go with your family. I really, yeah. I mean, the amount of time that would be associated with that. I think that would be awesome. I would like it to be where it's already established a little bit there. They've already got the habitats in Mars for us to live, and there's some food and that kind of thing. But yeah, send me to the moon though, please. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, right now with the spacecraft that we have that we're looking at, I mean, I think it's still in about the 9-month time to get to Mars. And then, of course, you can't go anytime and you can't come back anytime because the planets all have to line properly to be able to get there and back. And so once you get there, you're going to spend an extended amount of time before you get to come home. I think at least a year before you could even come home. So that's about a 3-year commitment at a minimum. That's even you just move there. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And that whole idea of close is relative, right? So close being 9 months versus years. Yeah. And you are on, dude. Look, I saw you. Aw. Woo! You're in space, Lily. Rocking it there. Look at you. What's your question?
The stars look like in outer space.
Ah, they don't twinkle because we're above the atmosphere enough that they're not getting that kind of hazy, twinkly thing. They're gorgeous. So, just like down here on Earth, where you have to get somebody go outside someplace really dark, or get into a place that's really dark to look at the sky and see the stars, really see the stars. We have to do the same thing on the space station. So if we, with our own eyes, really want to see the stars out there when it's nighttime below, we get the space station really dark. We get up near the window with our cameras and our eyes, and it looks a little bit like what you have behind you. But all the dots of light are really crystal clear, and you see colors too. Like you can see colors in it as well. And sometimes we're lucky to have aurora going on at the same time. It's just beautiful, really beautiful. No, and I've never really seen it down here on Earth. Once in Norway when it wasn't dark enough yet, but we saw them several times during my mission. It wasn't really active when I flew my station flight. So it was really special when we did get to see them. But I tell you, it would never get old. Not a single view out that window got old. Everything was like a surprise every time you looked at it, even if you were looking at the same thing again. Yeah. Not reprimanded, but during the day, during the work day, yeah, you'd get the little call, "Hey, Nikki, you gonna come do some work?" And so I would set my watch. I'd set a timer on my watch if it was during the workday to remind me that I had to go back to work. Yeah, it was very early. So when I flew on my first flight in 2009, we didn't have live internet from the space station, but we were able to tweet by sending things down to the ground, and then they would post them for me, a little bit like what Chris would do or his son would do later for him. Um, and that was great. And then was actually part of the first tweet up that happened in space, which is where we had a whole bunch of people on the ground, like doing this Twitter thing, and Jeff Williams and I engaged from the space station on that. But you're right. And I think NASA has done a much better job. Actually, all of the space agencies that are involved have over time with utilizing these new ways to communicate. It's kind of like art. Art engages with people in a whole new way, right? They might not know about a space station, but they see some painting that, whether they like it or not, and you can talk to them about what's going on in space. And I think the astronauts now are really excited about being able to share the experience through these different tools that more and more people will engage with. And then they'll understand that, oh my gosh, there is a space station. There are people from 15 different countries up there working together on really important things, and I should know about that. And what is it? Have you guys, Steve, do you share, there's like that for everyone if they don't know about it, the apps that you can get on your phone and computer where you can put your address in and it'll tell you when the space station is flying over your house, and you can go out and watch this beautiful bright dot of light move from one side of the sky to the other. Yeah. Yep. It's amazing. So I highly recommend you guys, if you haven't done it, get on the computer, find out when it's flying over your house. There'll be passes that are like 5 minutes long where you can watch it from one horizon to the other. And it's so cool to see it moving across the sky, and to think that on that dot of light, there are 6 people up there living and working and moving around the planet every 90 minutes. It's really neat. Yeah. Yes, they are. Yeah. Well, we all, I mean, and I think that's not just us. I think everybody is impacted one way or another. Yeah, so I'm doing things like this, where I think it's really important to just volunteer and be present for the people that we're talking to today. I think that's really important. So I'm trying to do as much of that as possible. I think it helps both ways. It's helpful for me to see the kids on the other side too, to see you guys interested in all of this. We're continuing the work of the Space for Art Foundation. We've got this new project, which I hope all of you will check out and send us your artwork. And I'm writing a book, so I have some time to work on that. And yeah, maybe I'll even have some time to do some of my own artwork. That would be nice. Yeah, yeah. Excellent. Yep. Okay, so a couple things because you're giving me the opportunity. So one is I'll go back to what we talked about earlier, and this is for everyone. The rocket ship does not care if you're a boy or girl. Okay, so do not just go for it. The other thing is, we go to space. It's really complicated to get to space. It's complicated to live, even for a little while, on a spaceship in space and to get home safely and all of that. That's a complex thing to do. And in all of that, what is really impressive to me is that when I think about my spaceflight experience, it comes down to really simple things that I think all of you already know already. When I think back, I think I learned about them probably when I was 5 or 6 years old. And they're really, really important for us to keep in our mind all the time and think about. And I'm finding myself reflecting more and more on it now as I'm home, living this way too, is that, you know what? We live on a planet. We don't think about that a lot. We're all already in space. We are Earthlings, all of us. No matter where we live on this planet, we are all Earthlings. And the only border that matters is that thin blue line we saw earlier, that blue line that blankets and protects us all here on Earth. And so I would ask you, not just now while you're living, isolated in your homes, kind of like astronauts on a spaceship, but I would ask you from here on out to think of yourselves as crew members and not just passengers on Earth. And I would ask you to think about Earth as spaceship Earth. And to go forward with those ideas. And it's amazing how just positively that can help you with the choices you make and the way you live your life. So thanks for listening to me.
Hello.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Experience was amazing.
I gotta get a video of that. That was awesome.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Do you?
Bye bye bye. Bye bye bye.
Oh, cool. Look at you. That's me. That's you. Thanks, you guys. I'm really glad you joined us. You're welcome.
You are great. Thank
Bye.
you so much.
Bye bye.
Bye.
All right, that was fun. Yay. Okay, I'll do it. I will send you. Yeah. Thanks. Have fun with Luca on Thursday. Please say hi for me. Okay, see ya. Bye.